When we were kids, the Rubik's Cube was the ultimate puzzle. Fascinating yet frustrating.
However, growing up, we were never able to solve them. So fast forward 10 years into the future, and we wondered
Have you guys solved it yet?
if we would be able to crack the code
You guys are useless.
and solve the Rubik's Cube in under 3 minutes.
But that's not all. We will only give ourselves 1 week to do it. No pressure, right? The pros can do it in seconds. But we're just two guys with no prior experience, no shortcuts, just a lot of determination.
We kick things off with a little experiment. No practice, no tutorials. We will give ourselves 10 minutes to see how far we'll get with just willpower and sheer guesswork.
We began the timer and frantically turned the cube aimlessly trying to solve it until something hopefully clicked. But let me tell you, it didn't. Not even close. It was chaotic. 1 minute in and we were already doubting ourselves. Every time we got close to aligning a side, we had to break it apart just to make another move. The clock hit 0 and we didn't even solve one side.
But that was just the beginning. The real challenge hasn't even started yet.
After our embarrassing attempt, we went our separate ways, each determined to crack the cube on our own. The goal wasn't just to solve it once. We needed to solve it under 3 minutes.
3 minutes might sound like a lot of time, but trust me.
When you're staring down at a scrambled Rubik's Cube, it's like you're trying to run a marathon in minutes.
I know we couldn't just wing it, we needed help.
So I went on YouTube and I found J Perm's tutorial, which seemed simple enough. First, I needed to solve a white cross. Then work on the corners using a basic algorithm.
But as you can imagine, things got complicated fast.
He said layer by layer. What he didn't say was prepare to feel like your brain is melting. I watched the same steps over and over again, trying to get the pieces in place, but it felt impossible. I was completely lost and nothing he was showing made sense to me. But eventually, after countless rewinds and retries, I finally solved the middle layer.
I went with Cubehead's tutorial.
He said that this was the best method to solve the cube, so I thought I'd be flying through it after 12 minutes.
But I couldn't have been more wrong. A minute in and I was completely lost, and I felt like he was just speaking in a different language.
But I wasn't about to give up.
I had to take it slow and rewind after every single step to make sure I understood everything he was explaining. My progress was slower than a snail, but it was progress.
Or at least that's what I kept telling myself as I fumbled through it. Would this ever make sense? I wasn't so sure.
After hours of struggling, I had already understood the first 2 layers.
And that small victory felt like climbing Mount Everest. But when I got to the top, it was like I'd fallen all the way back to the bottom. The algorithms he was teaching me were not making any sense, and every turn I took left me feeling even more confused.
But I still pressed on. I wasn't about to let a little cube defeat me.
I was in the same boat. The first 2 layers, okay, I could manage those. But a top layer, it was an entirely different beast.
Each new algorithm felt like a new way to mess up the entire cube. There were so many new algorithms to memorize and so many rules that had to be applied under certain conditions. It was overwhelming, to say the least. But all I could do is watch the tutorial over and over again. As I got further into the tutorial and closer to completing the cube, I was excited but confused. I had no clue how it got here, and honestly, looking at the cube at this stage, I still would have no idea how to solve it.
I failed to complete my cube. So I restarted, then again and again, and it felt like an endless loop of failure.
I would work my way up to the last layer. Just needed to solve the corners in the correct orientation. And then, I would make a small mistake and mess up the entire cube. So I would have no choice but to start again.
I repeated the process for a couple of hours until I finally got my first ever fully solved cube.
After 3 painful hours, I did it. I completed my first Rubik's Cube. It was no easy task. I had to rewatch the entire video, several times, as I would mess something up along the way, and I would have to start again. But now that I did it once, I have to step it up a notch and aim for minutes instead of hours.
After finally solving my first cube, I was feeling good, maybe a little too good.
So I scrambled it again, ready to solve it solo this time. I felt that rush of confidence. And then I forgot every single step. Still, there was one thing different this time. Confidence. Even though I messed up, I felt like I could eventually get it.
I have the basic idea of how this can be solved now. I just need to get the steps ingrained into my head.
But going solo, that was a whole other challenge. The top player was still my enemy.
One wrong move and it was back to the beginning.
I couldn't count how many times I had to start from scratch. But finally, after a few solid hours of practice, I solved it on my own. No tutorial, no help. Just me and the cube. My only concern at this point is if I will be able to get my time under 3 minutes by the end of the week. I've spent 2 days at this point just trying to solve the cube, and my time is still several hours.
My times weren't great either. I was clocking in at about 11 minutes. Definitely not something to brag about.
But I knew practice was the key. So I worked on memorizing the most common movements, the righty and lefty algorithms. Hours of repeating the same moves over and over until they became second nature. Up, right, down, left, over and over again.
By day 4, I'd made some real progress. I'd shaved my time down to about 8 minutes, which felt like a win.
Repetition has been key at this point, just building that muscle memory and letting what I learned take the lead.
To be honest, the jump from 3 hours to just minutes wasn't as intense as I thought. Once I could remember the algorithm and the correct steps, then the worst I could do is 12 minutes.
I kept pushing, faster, smoother turns, fewer mistakes. I had a few moments of brilliance, getting my time down to 5 minutes on a good run.
But then the pressure started getting to me. Not only was I trying to complete the cube in under 3 minutes, but I was also trying to complete the cube faster than my brother. The last thing I wanted to do was to lose to my brother and not even complete the cube in under 3 minutes. Yeah, no, GG's.
Yes, I completed it!
You win. I'm not gonna solve it.
2 minutes and 23 seconds.
Oh, what a nightmare.
The final day was approaching. Could I break the 3-minute mark? I was getting close, but there was still that little voice in my head telling me I wouldn't be able to make it. And with only 2 days left, there was no room for mistakes.
The night before the final showdown, I was nervous. Every solve felt like I was right on the edge, but never quite fast enough.
I went to bed that night thinking about nothing but the cube. Was I going to pull this off? I wasn't so sure.
And here we are, the final day, the moment we've all been waiting for. 1 week, countless hours of practice, and now it's time to see if we can break the elusive 3-minute mark. More importantly, who's going to do it first?
My hands are trembling, the pressure is insane. Every move feels like I'm moving in slow motion. And I'm constantly second guessing myself. Can I actually do this?
I was confident at the start, but now I am freaking out. One small mistake and I am done for. My only hope is to stay calm and move fast.
I'm on the last stretch of solving my cube. I have no idea what the time is, and I really don't want to know. We have made it this far to fail now.
This challenge is almost over. I'm on the last step to solving the cube and this is always the hardest part for me. One bad turn and it's game over.
So my brother had a better time this time, so he's the winner for this challenge. If you guys like these type of videos, go watch this one.